All right, hello everybody, welcome back to the stream. Good to see you. Today we're going to be working on controller support. I was working on this last night, trying to get everything feeling good. I think it's feeling all right. I mean, I think, there's obviously like a lot of work to do, but I think the main thing that I want to try to figure out today is how to actually get the drag and drop for items working. Because like I can navigate through everything relatively okay. I mean, it definitely needs to be polished up, but what I currently can't do is move things around between boards. So I think that's what's going to be the next biggest piece to go over. But before I get into it, Alchemortis is available for wishlisting. There's also a playtest which is live now for Patreon members. So if you want to give the game a try, you can head on over to the Patreon. Oops. If you subscribe at either tier, you will get access to the playtest. If you subscribe at the top tier, I'll send you a Steam key for the full game when the game launches and put your name in the in-game Alchemortis credits. So yeah, it's a great way to support me. But again, you do not have to support on Patreon to join the playtest. The playtest will be playable by everyone in however many days. Like I said, I don't know the exact day that the playtest is going to go live, but it'll be approximately a week from when the Patreon playtest went live, which was Monday. So the public playtest is coming up in half a week, less than half a week, something like that. The public playtest, I don't know did I say Patreon playtest? The public playtest is coming up in like half a week. So you don't have to pay anything to support the game. You don't have to pay anything to join the playtest. That will be going live for everyone very soon. And I also have my Udemy courses. Check those out if you want to learn how to build games in the Godot engine. Okay. Am I on the right branch? That's the question. I am. Hello, Clickertail. Welcome. Good to see you. Snupbill, thank you for the IDR 10,000 again. Very generous as always. Thank you, thank you. Always appreciate that with the message, Yummers. Yummers, look at the Yummers train. Hello, Emerson. Welcome. Light Tiramisu, good morning. Played one run, died to the mayor, but it's fun. The game is going to be viral. Are you serious? Do you think it's actually going to be viral? We will see. We will see. I'm going to temper my expectations. I don't know. I'll start creating my Alka-like. Yeah, there you go. Man, to be a game developer that spawns an entire genre of copycats would be like, ugh. That would be amazing. Hello, Yito. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you again. All right, so let me show you what I've got going on with the controller support here. Let me plug in my controller first. Maybe I should have done this before the stream started, but that's okay. Okay. I've got my Xbox controller plugged in, because I don't do batteries. I hate batteries. I mean, wires are annoying too, but... Anyway, so... We gotta wait for this to start up. So again, to recap, what I've been trying to do is I've been trying to... This is not working. Okay, I've been trying to add controller support in a way that does not require me to rework large aspects of my code base. So the main requirements for the controller support here are I shouldn't have to go in and update literally every single piece of UI. Like that should not be the case. I shouldn't have to like restructure all of my scenes for controller. Like I'm not doing that, right? So that's one constraint, one requirement. And the other requirement is that it should just be sort of just like a transparently, like it's just a layer that sits on top of the game and interacts with the game in a very natural way that requires all of my UIs to have minimal or no knowledge about the controller functionality. So essentially what I want is I want the controller functionality to like sit above the game and just be plug and play, like functional, without having to go into each individual scene and each individual button and like configure neighbors and like say what happens when the device gets reconnected and disconnected and all that stuff. And so I think that has been largely successful. So what I have is I've got a system where I've got my input device manager. This is an auto load. So if I open up input device manager, this is an auto load node. The input device manager is responsible for basically a couple of things. It's responsible for listening when the device has changed, which is just done by examining the inputs coming through the scene tree and detecting if the last event was a mouse event or a joypad event. And if it detects that the event is different from the previous input device being used, it will emit a signal that the device changed. Okay, so that's part number one. Part number two, it's also responsible for constructing the navigation direction based on which keys are pressed or which D-pad buttons are pressed. And then if it comes up with a direction, it will call focus manager, grab focus and direction. So basically the input device manager is just responsible for collecting the navigation input data as well as telling me when the device has changed. The focus manager, this is where all of the focus functionality works. So just for background, the way that controller is going to have to work and the way that I've set it up to work is that every control node in the game that needs to be focusable by the controller, selectable by the controller, and clickable by the controller needs to have its focus mode set to all. However, I don't want to have any focus mode set on any controls when I'm using the mouse. And the reason for that is because I don't want there to be like an invisible focus and then you hit the space bar and it like selects that item instead of like doing whatever you thought the space bar was going to do. Because like if you've got focus when you're using a mouse and keyboard and you're not showing that focus to the user and they press enter or space, it may like do something unexpected. So focus disabled when you're using the mouse, and then focus enabled for only the clickable elements when you're using the controller. So this focus manager is basically responsible for doing all of that stuff. So it detects when the focus is changed. It just keeps a log of the last focused control. That's an implementation detail. But here's the interesting part of this. On node added and on node removed. So this node, which is actually a child of input device manager, so it's basically an auto load itself, even though it's not technically configured as one. This literally listens for every single node entering and leaving the tree. And it detects if the node added is a control, it keeps track of all of the tree controls. So I have at any given moment in the game a list of all of the controls that are currently in the tree. And then the focus context boundary, we could talk about that later. Focus priority component, we'll talk about that later as well. When the nodes are removed from the tree, it does the reverse operation. It removes that control from the all tree controls. So this all tree controls is particularly useful for getting this focus candidates here. So there's a couple of problems. What happens if you're using a mouse and keyboard and you then want to use your controller and you press a button? Well, you need to find a control to focus, right? Like the navigation between all of the different control elements is not going to work if you don't have an initial point of focus. So this refocus method, what this essentially does is this says if there are no actively focused elements, we're going to grab the focus candidates, which are all of the nodes that could possibly accept focus. And then we're going to do some extra logic related to the focus priority component, which we don't need to go through. But what it will do is it will just iterate over all of the focus candidates and just select the first one if it's focusable. So it grabs the focus there. Okay. Find best focus and direction. This is an interesting one. So find best focus and direction. This accepts a direction. So this is coming from the input device manager. So you can see that this focus manager grab focus and direction. What this will ultimately do is this detects what is the currently focused control and what is the direction we're getting from the input manager. And then in here, it's basically using that focus candidates, which is the list of all of the candidates that can receive focus. And then it's just doing sort of like a best guess match based on the direction that I've supplied to focus the one that's in the proper direction. That's what that does. Okay. So we've got our find best focus and direction. We've got our refocus, which grabs a focus if there is no focus currently. Now, the last thing that I have is I have this update focus toggle listener. So I can register focus listeners, and what a focus listener is it does a couple of things. A focus listener, let's see. Am I not registering this focus listener? Register focus toggle listener. So in the focus manager, I can register an individual control as a focus toggle listener, where I pass in a reference to myself, and then I pass in a condition. And this condition basically says, should I be allowed to receive a focus mode change from none to all? So in this case, the clickable control is registering itself with the focus manager. And then it's saying, I can have my focus mode set to all if my input is not disabled. And this is used in a couple of places. One, I can call update focus listener manually, and this would be useful in cases where like my input disabled state is changing without my device changing, right? So like I have situations where clickable controls become unclickable no matter what. And so I need to update the focus mode for that when that happens. But the benefit of registering the focus listener with the focus manager is now this can also dynamically change the focus mode when the device changes. So in here, on device changed, this calls update focus toggle listeners when it's either a controller or not. So I guess I could just move this out technically and put this here, but we're not going to do that right now because that may break something. And this just iterates over all the registered listeners, and it updates the focus mode. So in here, this enable focus listener, disable focus listener, it's just changing the focus mode, but then it's calling a refocus to grab the next valid focusable control if we're in a state where that's allowed, right? So that's the gist of the input system. There's one other interesting thing that I want to mention before we actually do some new work, but I'm going to catch up with the chat here first. Hello, Celestial Beagle. Welcome. One question, is the Alcahest supposed to remove corrupted abilities too? Maybe not, but if it does, that's okay. I could think about that. Actually, yeah, I think it's supposed to do that because it says removes all abilities, right? Hello, X-Jokes, welcome. Everything is good. How are you doing? I tried that, but it didn't work. I was a little confused since the description says it removes all abilities. Oh, yeah, maybe it should do that. Let me open up my board. I probably won't fix that for the playtest, but that will be something that I want to do. Well, here's a problem too. I don't know if I wanted to remove legendary abilities, or maybe I should just make it remove everything. Yeah, so let's maybe do all... Well, yeah, I'm going to have to think about that. Because corrupted abilities say that they can't be removed or replaced via alchemy. Yeah, I'll have to figure that out. Anyway, good morning, Ninja Link. This is mostly for Steam Deck, right? I can't imagine why one would play with the keyboard and mouse and PC or a console port. Yeah. So obviously, Steam Deck is my #1 priority because I think this is like a perfect game to play on the Steam Deck, and I've already gotten many comments from a lot of you that, you know, you want like very good Steam Deck support when the game launches. So that's definitely something that I want to do. But also, yes, I mean, there is a possibility into the future, depending on how Alchemortis does, that console ports could happen. Again, that totally depends on like how it goes, but having that controller support in place already should hopefully reduce the effort required to get the game ported to console. So yeah, I think it's just, you know, it's one of those things where Steam Deck is the top priority. I would hate for this game to release, be a perfect like Steam Deck game, and then not have Steam Deck support. So this is one of those games where it almost feels like it's made for the Steam Deck, you know? It's just a very like lightweight game that's easy to pick up and play, and like, yeah, I think it would be a shame not to have Steam Deck full support at launch. Hello, Bad Tutor Nick. Why don't you use GDScript? Is it worse? No, I don't think it's worse. I just like C# better for the game I'm making. More structure and all that stuff. Steam Deck, that was the plan from the start. I wouldn't say it was the plan from the start, but once people started saying, hey, I want this to be on Steam Deck supported, I was like, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Maybe it's just the wording, but it makes sense. Okay, the last interesting bit of the focus stuff is that we have some situations in the game where, like at the main menu here, so we have some situations where we've got a bunch of clickable / focusable elements here, but then I bring up another menu that sits on top of that. And one of the problems was that, you know, all of these items in the background would still be focusable with the controller. So I would be selecting things like that were like behind the menu. Now there's a couple of ways to handle that. One way to handle that is to just explicitly disable all these things when a menu pops up. However, I would need to do that for every potential place in the game where a menu could potentially pop up. So like the pause menu or the unlocks menu or whatever. And then we have the issue, of course, of the map being open, all that good stuff. So you got the pause menu coming up, then you got unlocks menu on top of that. So it's like there's a lot of different like combinations of screens that can all be placed on top of each other. And so what I did is I have this focus context boundary manager. And so if we look at that, so excuse me, this focus context boundary manager, it essentially detects these focus context boundary components. And what it does is, let me see. So when the context boundary component gets added to the tree, it registers the boundary with the focus context boundary manager, and then it unregisters it when it exits the tree. When it registers it, it gets added to this hash set of all context boundaries, and then it rebuilds the scoped controls. And so I don't need to go through all of this, but essentially what this is doing is the context boundary does kind of what it sounds like. It forces all of the focusable elements to only be the controls that are ancestors of its parent node. So that means that when I find a focus context boundary in the tree, anywhere in the tree, it limits what can be focused to only those controls that are ancestors of the parent. Now the question is, what happens if you have multiple focus boundary components in that subtree, right? So, you know, I could somewhere down here in another scene that's created down here have another focus boundary component. And it's like, well, there's two focus boundary components in the tree. And what it does is it basically just, it's kind of borrowing like what the Godot input order is. It's like a it's a depth first, like a reverse depth first search or something like that. So basically the idea is that it will prioritize whichever focus context boundary is the deepest in the tree or at the bottom most of the tree. So that means that if I have a situation where, I guess I'll just put some nodes here. So let's just say I have like a node 2D here, and then I add a focus context boundary component here. How do I do this? Focus context boundary component there. And then let's say that I add a control node here, but then I add another focus context boundary component here. So I've got two focus context boundary components as descendants of main. So which one takes priority? Well, in this case, this one is at the bottom, more towards the bottom of the tree. So this one takes priority. So that means that any controls that are descendants of this focus context boundary are the ones that can be validly focused. And the reason for that is pretty obvious. It solves exactly that problem that I was telling you, which is that if I put this unlock menu on top of whatever it's rendering on top of, that is going to be accomplished by basically putting it at the bottom of the scene tree, which means that the focus boundary context boundary component that is associated with this unlocks menu will be more toward the bottom of the tree than anything else that is currently in context, which means that this is basically always going to be the focus priority that gets used. So yeah, so that focus context boundary component essentially just keeps track, or this focus context boundary manager, it keeps track of all of the controls that are actively in the scope. And then if we go back to the focus manager, if you remember this focus candidates will take the actively scoped controls as a priority if there are any context boundaries in the tree. And if there are no context boundaries in the tree, it falls back to all of the controls in the tree. So all of those methods that I told you about, like refocus and find best focus in direction, those all use the focus candidates. So we end up with a situation where as things are being added and dynamically removed from the tree, these focus context and focus boundaries and focus elements are being orchestrated by this whole system. And then we end up with a situation which is relatively clean, where I don't need to worry about handling all of these different edge cases about what if this UI is on top of this one, or what if this one pops up here and whatnot. I can just use the scene tree to control the focus priorities and the focus boundaries. So we end up in a situation where if I go into the game, we end up in a situation where like I can go into the game, I can open my unlocks, and then I can like, none of those clickable controls from the menu were disabled when I open the unlock screen. It's just that focus boundary is saying, okay, here's the limited subset of controls that are focusable. And then I can just go down here and select everything, right? So I can go across the top here, hover over the characters, I can close this, and then I go back. Then I can go to start. I can select my necromancer, go into the game. And now in here, what in the heck? Oh, that's not good. Why didn't it play in? I don't think that's related to the controller stuff. Oh. I forgot to delete all this stuff. Oops, that would have been bad. Okay. I was using the main as the example, and that was not good. Okay. So we go start. We go here. We go in. Go into the game here. Now, obviously, there's some interaction problems here, but you know, if I go to settings and then I go to my unlocks, that focus manager takes precedence again. I close that, and then we're back into like the settings. I haven't added the focus context, so this is a good example of the problem, right? So I haven't added that focus context boundary to the settings menu here, and you can see that I'm still trying to select the options that are behind that settings menu. And the same with these tooltips, right? Like those need to have, but basically, so now all I need to do is like for these confirmation dialogues, I just need to add a focus context boundary to the confirmation dialogue scene, and then it will just work. Now there's just there are other like specific interaction issues that need to be fixed. This is not like a silver bullet solution, but it does make managing the focus context a whole lot easier and with minimal effort as well. So that's what I mean. I've got like a whole focus system that sits on top of the game that just very naturally handles everything for me. And now it's just a matter of like polishing up the individual interactions. I want to use C# too, but I can't release games to web using C# and new versions of Godot. That's true. I have it in the back of my head that Pythonic languages are not as easy to scale. They abstract so much that I don't know how it could be used in very large projects. That's what I would deduce, at least. I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, I think Alchemortis would be exceedingly difficult to build with GDScript. I'm using interfaces so heavily. I'm using abstract classes so heavily. Virtual functions, like, yeah. Does Godot have the concept of a modal dialogue control built in? I think it does. Yeah, it does. Apologies if I'm way off base here, but Google says there's an exclusive property that forces the dialogue to capture all input. Yes, that is true. I, for whatever reason, have not used the dialogues. Confirmation dialogue. So yeah, I don't know. I've never used that. It's just like I just prefer to go straight controls. You know, Unity will allow you to export to web, although they use old versions of C# from .NET 6 to 8, I believe. Intuitively, I would think that you can represent the focus boundaries as a stack. Can there be multiple menus open at once where both should be controllable? So what I would probably do in that case is if both menus are designed to be controllable, let's say that I had a situation like that where I wanted to put two menus side by side. What I could do is just group those into a parent node that has the focus context boundary sitting above both of them. And then if those individual scenes for whatever UI I'm trying to show have context boundaries built into their scenes, I could just disable those context boundaries, right? So I could just for that specific case just say, hey, disable this context boundary. We're not going to use that one. We're going to use the one that sits above them. That's not a situation that I have, but there was something I was thinking about last night where I was like, it may be useful to be able to disable and enable the context boundary dynamically. But that would just be as simple as like, go to my focus context boundary component here, add like enable and disable methods here, and then just like register or unregister from the focus context boundary manager based on what happens. Because registering or unregistering triggers a rebuild of the scoped controls. So, and it's rebuild deferred. So this is deferred and debounced, which means that I could call this 100 times in a single frame, and it's only ever going to rebuild once because it has this flag that says, okay, do I currently have a rebuild action queued? If so, just return, and then call the rebuild scope controls deferred and then set that flag back to false. So this is nice because like if I trigger multiple rebuilds in a single frame, it's just going to be a waste to like rebuild it multiple times. I basically just want the state to settle before I do the rebuild. So I can just call this whenever I want, basically with like no cost if there's already a rebuild queued. I don't know why I mentioned that, but anyway. So now we got to get, so the hard part is trying to figure out how to get drag and drop working with controller. So let me think about this. I think it's mostly just going to be a matter of going into the card mouse events manager and like updating everything. So we could skip menu here. Let's do this. Debug. But yeah, that focus context boundary, I think it worked really well. I mean, I basically borrowed like some web ideas because it's very common to have that kind of like focus trap in web or, you know, React. At least when I was doing React a couple years ago, had like suspense boundaries for like blocking API calls, blocking web fetches. So when you have a tree structure like that, just setting up a node in your tree to be like a trap or a boundary is a very useful thing to do sometimes. Okay, so I can open my inventory. I've got these. I need to be able to grab these guys and move them around. And that also needs to trigger... Okay, so there's a couple of problems here. So there's a couple of big problems. One, even just picking up the thing to begin with is going to be a problem. But two, I almost need to set the controller input mode to when I'm dragging something, instead of going to focus any element on the screen, like the alchemy pot or whatever, or these speed controls. If I'm dragging a card, it needs to switch into a mode where I'm actually like selecting individual cells in the board. So that's going to be a little bit tricky. There's one way to do it, which is just to put a bunch of individual control nodes on each cell. And then just have it invisibly go to each one. The other thing I could do is somehow disable all potentially focusable controls. And then just switch into an entirely different mode. Let me think about this. This is going to be the trickiest part. I really don't know what to do. Also, my controller stopped working. I think this controller is like breaking or something. Sometimes I have to unplug it and replug it. So I wonder, let me think, what's the best way to do this? You can disable the menu movement or separate a layer, I believe, so only focus on a specific type of UI. Let's take a look at the card rendering server. So let's just connect the focus entered and focus exited to the on mouse entered and on mouse exited. Let's see what that does. And then I need to figure out how to actually begin the drag here, because this is going to be completely different. Object reference not set to an instance of object. Oh. Let's register the toggle listener. Huh? No. Why is that breaking? Focus manager line 53. Did I break something? What is going on here? Or was that error just there and I missed it? No, that error was there. Okay, why is this not... Let's see. All right, let's just start up a... Let's just launch debug and see. It should catch unhandled exceptions, and then I can look at the call stack. Oh, maybe not. Something's weird. Let's try. I've been having this issue recently where I had an issue yesterday where like I thought I was going mad, but I rebuilt and cleaned the project and then my code started working. So I don't know what's going on there, but let's just see. Probably because I'm switching branches a lot, if I had to guess. Wonder if there's some like Godot weird caching stuff. No? Why is that still here? Custom button set disabled. Custom button set disabled. Does it think instance is null? Update focus listener. Oh, I see. It's probably a null instance. Maybe it's just like a race condition, maybe. It's not, instance has not been set before, or not race condition, but order of operations. No, that's fine. I don't know what's going on there. All right, we can just ignore that for now, I guess. Does everything else work fine? And the controller needs to be unplugged and replugged. Okay. Well, I can see tooltips now. That's pretty cool. Oh, interesting. Wait a minute. Uh-oh. Something's broken. I can't move anymore. So I can quick move, but I can't move it back. Okay, interesting. Interesting. What do you think is the best way to learn Godot, both at coding game logic and using nodes? I just learn by doing, really. You just practice with your own projects and try to build your own things and then see what happens. But yeah, I think Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of trial by fire. Like, you just go in, you try to build something, you're gonna get stuck. That's by design. You know, you go into it understanding that you're gonna get stuck, that you're gonna encounter problems, and then you take the time and effort to try to resolve those problems, and that's how you learn, right? Like, the more problems you solve, the more you learn. So, I think that's a good way to do it. Been binging your videos and just want to say I really like your teaching style. Me being a software engineer, you talking in those terms is so helpful, where some other videos simplify things too much. Okay, yeah, I'm glad you like it. Awesome. I was also a software engineer. I'm retired now for now. We'll see if I need to get another job after Alchemortis, but yeah, I'm glad you like the content. Hello, VoidBlit. Last time I checked, C# and Godot had an issue where nodes weren't typed, couldn't get a node by type. Like, again, Unity, and you're somehow circumventing that for better type safety, or just live with it? That is not a problem now. I don't think so. I mean, I've never tried to get a node by interface, but you can definitely do the generic get node, and that works just fine. So yeah, I haven't had any issues with that. As far as I can tell, like, C# is basically like 100% fine. Like, there are some weird things about it. Very, very few places there are some weird things, but interacting with the Godot API is very straightforward and very reliable. So, hello, Courier Games. If the inventory grid makes the nodes under a parent, like, you can fetch all the children and assign a memory for them as cells and separate it for the focus of UI navigation. Yeah, I don't know if I want to do, like, I just don't know how I want to handle this, because I know where all the boards are and I know where all the cells are, because, like, I know what the cell size is. I know what the board size is and I know what the cell size is. So the question is just, do I want to try to create like a little custom, like a specific, what am I trying to say? Do I want to create a special way of handling moving things around the board grid? Or do I want to try to hook into all the focus stuff that I've just built? Hello, Abo, welcome. Did you make GDD for the game? I did not know. I don't like game design documents. They've never been super helpful for me. I just don't, I mean, for those of you who've been watching for a while, I just don't like documentation generally. Like, I don't like comments in my code. I don't like having external documents that are outside the source code that need to be referenced or updated or whatever. Like, I'm not a fan of documentation at all. for internal projects. Obviously, if you're making something that's like publicly consumable, like an SDK or some kind of API, the documentation is extremely important. But for personal projects, like, the code is the documentation, right? And it's like, I don't want to have external sources that I constantly need to be updating and referencing. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And it's like, I've never understood the point of a GDD either, because it's like, it's not possible to design the game properly on paper from the start. So it's like, if you know it's not possible to get the game design solid on a piece of paper before you even start writing code, then what's the point of doing it, right? It's like, it's just a waste of time, in my opinion. It's like, and like all the stuff that you could reliably capture in a GDD, right? Like, here's the theme of the game and here's the genre. It's like, are you going to forget that? Are you going to forget what theme your game has? Are you going to forget what genre your game is in? It's like, no, right? Like, the things that really matter are like, what are the actual moment-to-moment interactions? And you're not going to be able to define those up front. Like, you just kind of have to, at least for me, you have to go in, try something, play test it, see what works and what doesn't, and tweak. And it's like, Alchemortis is impossible to plan correctly from the start. It's just not possible. So I don't really understand the point of a GDD in that case. So my issue is that I needed to cast it, couldn't just get a node by type. Oh, gotcha. Okay. You're not retired, you're doing it right now. Started using Obsidian because of you. Awesome. I'm not paid by Obsidian, so that's unfortunate, but that's all right. Hey, do you look inside any other games to find any interesting implementations? Slay the Spire 2 is made in Godot and can be decompiled, and devs are open to others to look at it. I have not personally looked into anything, no. No. So, but I mean, there's definitely some interesting stuff to learn, I'm sure. I think when Alchemortis is finally released, what I want to personally like do deep dives into the code and like explain how the systems are working. But I'll do that after release, I think. We swing with whatever we come up with on the fly. Yes, we do. I guess maybe it's not a huge issue and could probably add it with an extension method or something. Yeah, extension methods, like that's the nice thing about using C# with Godot is like wherever the Godot API is lacking, you can just augment it with extension methods. And I do that all the time. Like I have a Godot utilities library that has a bunch of extension methods that I use constantly. So it's nice that you can do that. How long do you plan for the game to be? How do you plan for the game before actually starting working on it? Just one step at a time. I know that like when I first started the game, it's like I know I wanted an auto battler. So the first thing to do is like build the auto battler system, right? And then the next problem was like, okay, now I have the auto battler system, but I need there to actually be a game loop that you interact with this. So then it's like setting up all the architecture for the game loop, right? And it's like, okay, you just come up with problems and you solve them one at a time. If you know roughly what your end goal is, which is that I want to have a roguelike auto battler where like you can get upgrades and fight in combat and stuff, then it's just a matter of like solving the next most pressing problem, right? You solve one problem and then you solve the next problem and then you solve the next problem and you keep trying to work toward that goal. At least that's how I approach it. So code is the documentation, famous last words. Completely agree. That is such common advice to make that before working on the game. That makes no sense to me. Yeah, it never made much sense to me either. Like I think a lot of the typical like game dev advice is just not good. And look, I can't really call myself a successful game developer, so I'm just a guy spouting my opinions on the internet. So take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm just giving my opinions. I haven't sold 1 million copies of any games, so like you could disregard what I'm saying. But I never understood the advice of GDDs, and I also never understood the advice of like white boxing levels. Like this idea that when you're prototyping your game, just put ugly art in it and just get like the game mechanics down. It's like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Games are an interactive medium. Like part of the fun of a game is like how crunchy the sound effects are and what the visual effects are. And like, I think that if you just use ugly assets with no sound effects, no camera shake, no at least like placeholder good looking art, I think you're kind of miss a lot of like whether your game is fun or not, you know? And also it's just not very fun to work on a project that looks terrible, right? So yeah, I never understood like that advice either. Like just use terrible assets while you get the game mechanics built. It's like, a game is not just the mechanics, right? It's like, it's what is the sum total experience? Like, how are the moment-to-moment interactions? What does the sound like? Is there camera shake? Are there particle effects? Is it like satisfying to kill enemies or whatever? Those are not really game mechanics things. Those are presentation things, but the presentation is important, right? Game design a lot like water, it flows where it flows. Dialogues and relationships and general writing needs a GDD, definitely. Yeah, I don't write story games, so maybe that's true. Greedy algorithm approach, optimize for each step, maybe, yeah. Yeah, but I think like reworking entire features like that, my point still stands that like I wouldn't have been able to plan those features ahead of time anyway. Like, it's not like I gave no thought to the features that I was building. It's just that they didn't end up working the way that I wanted them to work, right? So like, I want the player to have this experience. Whether I design that experience on paper or right into the game, I still don't know if it's actually going to create the experience that I want, right? And even games that do create GDDs have to rewrite systems. Like, that's a normal part of game development. So the fact that I had to rewrite systems, the fact that anyone has to rewrite systems is like, that's not an exception, that's the rule. Like, you're going to rewrite systems when you're making your game because you're not going to get it correct the first time, regardless if you planned it or not, right? It's always from people that don't actually seem to make games. So basically, when you have an idea, you just open the engine and start working? Basically, yeah. Basically. But that push courses instead to sell the idea can make a living making games. I've used GDDs when working on group projects, never used one for projects where it's just me. Yeah, and the group thing may be helpful as well. Like, obviously, like, there needs to be some level of coordination when you're working with multiple people. However, whatever form that takes. If that takes the form of a GDD or if it takes the form of just, like, daily stand-ups or whatever. You said you don't like documentation, but do you come up with ideas on paper first, like when you don't have a solid idea what mechanic needs to look like yet? No. No, I just think about it, and then when I have a good idea, that's what I do. Like, here's the thing, it's like I don't need to write things down. Like, I'm not gonna forget a good idea that I have. The only time I forget ideas is like when they come into my head when I'm about to go to sleep, but then it's like I'm not in a position to write anything down on paper anyway, so it's like, you know, just don't forget. It's easy. Just don't forget. You must do this to be a good dev, yeah. I mean, like I said, this is just how I work. I'm not saying that you should do it one way or another. I'm just giving you my opinion, however uninformed it may be, and you should have that grain of salt ready so you can take it. At least a brainstorm or something. No, I just see, that's the thing. It's like I don't. Maybe it's just me, but I've never found writing things on paper to be all that useful, basically ever. Like, solving a math problem, sure, but like brainstorming ideas, it's like you can just brainstorm in your head. You don't need to, like, I've never gone to like a brainstorming session where everything is written down on like a whiteboard and ever reference the whiteboard again. It's like, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I just don't find like written documentation that all that interesting or useful. Whiteboarding helps me for level design. Can't get somewhat of a look figured out. It really motivates me. Kanban for mechanics, yeah. So that, like, this documentation here, it's not really documentation explaining how the game works. This is more like, this is the things that I need to do, right? So I'm not, maybe I was giving the impression that I just like do everything off the top of my head. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I don't design the game in the documentation, but I do log all the stuff that needs to be worked on as I think of it, because bugs will come up and it's like, okay, I gotta record that bug so I know, like, that bug is documented and can be worked on, right? So I'm not saying I don't use documentation at all. Like, this is my to-do list, right, which you've all seen many times. I'm talking specifically about the game design. Like, my game is not designed in here. This is all, like, here's all the content ideas that I have, and here's all the enemy card ideas and everything. So yeah. Just don't forget Temple Tap. Yes. Personally feel like paper is where ideas go to die. Too late. I'm already canceling you on Reddit. Uh-oh. Find that writing down my thoughts helps with focus. Yeah, whatever. I mean, look, whatever works for you, right? It's like, it's not, there's no right or wrong way to do it. I'm just saying, like, there are times where people present like game development as advice as if it's like, this is what you must do if you want to be a successful game dev or whatever. And it's like, I just don't think that's true. You know, it's like, you don't, having a GDD is not a requirement to making a good game, right? Hello, Zero. Why every time when I start working on a project without planning or making documentation, I end up canceling it because I feel lost? Do you end up not canceling your games that are documented? Like, it could just be a personal thing, you know? Courier games, dang. How do you have to-dos like this in Obsidian? Kanban plugin. Why do you need a plan? What is the plan really doing for you? Probably still canceled even with the plan. Yeah, I mean, in my experience, like, of all the games that I haven't finished, it's largely because they just sucked. And I'm not saying like the games that I did finish were any better, but sometimes you're working on a game and the idea isn't panning out, and it's like, that's not really because of a lack of documentation. It might just be because the game idea wasn't that good to begin with, It's like, you might feel lost because there's just not much there. Like, I've never really felt lost with Alchemortis. It's like, I always had a very clear idea of like what I wanted to do, and I always felt like I had something meaningful to do to work towards that. And yeah, there were individual situations where it's like, I don't know what to do with this alchemy, and maybe it takes me a couple of weeks to like think about it and figure out like what the next iteration of alchemy should be. But I always knew like I need alchemy to be really satisfying and fun to use. And so the problem was just like mostly just chewing on like, how do I actually make that happen, right? At the end of the day, making something and finishing anything is always a best bet. I'd rather be a guy with 20 small games than just one big game. Yeah. If anything might scratch that itch in your brain, you might not finish it because documenting tricks your brain. If the rules you followed brought you to this, of what use was the rule? Oh, No Country for Old Men mentioned. That's an awesome movie. I think that I canceled it because I thought everyone makes GDDs before making their games, and I don't. No, I don't even think that's true. I think I would love to like take a poll of like people who are solo developers. I have a bunch of like people that I've been in contact with that are also trying to make games. And I'd be interested to ask them, did you have a GDD? Because my impression among the people, so like I've talked to Aramis a couple of times, right? He's the creator of a game about feeding a black hole, which did really well. And my impression from talking to him is that he didn't have a GDD either. It was just an iterative process of like, we know we want to make this incremental game about feeding a black hole. And then it's just like constant rapid iteration and reevaluation of like, does this formula work? Does that formula work? How's this going? That's the impression that I get. That's the impression I get, like how a lot of successful games are built. It's like you have the core idea that you're working towards, and then you just do like rapid iteration, trying to get everything in line to serve that idea, right? Hello, Chris. Sorry I've been absent. No worries. No need to apologize. Always good to have you here. That may be true, Courier Games. Can it run on a Mac? Alchemortis can run on a Mac, yes. So I should actually do some work instead of chatting with you guys, but whatever, we're having fun, right? Are we having fun? I spent like 4 hours yesterday trying to I had Linux dual boot set up on my system specifically so I could go and test Alchemortis, right, on Linux. Imagine my shock yesterday when I booted into it and all of my NVIDIA drivers were suddenly broken and my internet didn't work. And I was like, this worked the last time I booted into it. So I basically spent an enormous amount of time trying to get it fixed. Never could get it fixed. I finally got like the driver to work for my internet, but then I was getting like 90% packet loss. And I was like, okay. So I just reinstalled the entire OS on my partition, and I think it's fine now. Like, knock on wood, I think it's fine. But I was able to finally, after like 4 or 5 hours of just like banging my head against the table, finally got it reinstalled, got Steam downloaded, played Alchemortis, and like it ran fine. So like, whatever. I'm glad I did it because I want to make sure that it works on Linux, but at the same time, that was just like a massive headache. That was a massive headache. And you know what I think it was? Hello, Brick Attune, by the way. Transfer anything work on X code is so annoying. Yeah. You're having fun? Good. Which distro? Oh, it's Zorin OS. It's a baby's first Linux, right? But I ultimately figured out, like when I was right in the middle of breaking everything, that it was probably because of secure boot. I think the last time that I installed it, I had temporarily disabled secure boot on in the BIOS, and then I would boot into Zorin after disabling secure boot. And I think it had been several months since I last did that, so I think I just forgot about that step. And so when I booted into Zorin yesterday with secure boot still on, it just like broke everything. But I got it reinstalled with secure boot support, so hopefully that's not an issue again. The games I made GDDs for never panned out. I got burnt out faster than the games I didn't make a GDD. Learn that from me. It's better to just start making. I'm playtesting on Linux and it's running smooth. Okay, awesome. Glad to hear that, Zero. I guess I could have just asked anyone if they were playing on Linux, but whatever. I think it's good. Like, the whole reason I installed that Zorin dual boot is because there was an issue, if you guys remember a couple of playtests ago, that was only happening on Linux. It was like a double card inspector bug, and it was only happening on Linux. So I installed my whole development environment over on that side of things and was able to reproduce the issue and fix it. So making my first big RPG, and now I'm totally regretting not having a GDD. That's all right. I mean, you can still make one if it's going to help you. I think 2D art is much harder than 3D. That's my opinion. I've made some simple models in Blender. I think it's easier than 2D art, especially pixel art. I think there's a sense in which 3D art could be easier, yes. Like, I think like creating 3D models to me actually seems like it might be in a lot of cases easier than drawing like a 2D sprite. And I don't know why that is exactly, but when I was in college, I did a little bit of 3D modeling for some of my classes, and I was always like kind of shocked at like how simple it was to get something relatively decently looking, where if I had tried to like draw the same thing, it would have just looked terrible, right? So it's like, I don't know what it is about it, but I think like, yeah, to some extent, like 3D modeling is somewhat easier than 2D art. Yeah, I mean, like I said, you should use whatever tools and processes are good for you, right? Don't not do or do something just because a guy on the internet told you. Like, just whatever works for you, right? At the end of the day, we're just trying to make complete games, and whatever tools and processes serve that end result for you is what you should do, right? Okay, I'm going to take a quick 3-minute break. When I come back, we're going to actually try to get this drag and drop stuff working with the cards. So I'll be right back in just 3 minutes and we'll continue on. All right, I'm back. Yeah, that works too. Let's see. You use Mathematica to generate shapes. That's an interesting workflow. Love how we're all game devs in here. Yeah. Okay, let's see if we can actually get this controller support working. And my controller's not working again. I wonder, let me try something. Also, I don't know where this error is coming from. That's kind of annoying. Steam initialization, turn off. Wait, this shouldn't be initialized. I don't know why Steam is being initialized. I don't know. Anyway, so I can quick move these things and then it breaks. But I actually don't want to quick move when I press the A button. Is it A? Yeah. I don't want to quick move when I press A. What I want to do is begin the drag. So let's go to my card mouse events manager. Do I have input handling here? Oh gosh. Register card, on card, connect to custom mouse entered, on card mouse entered. Okay. How do I handle click? Is action released action, change card input state clicking up. So this try quick move card here. Is it as simple as doing this? Okay, end drag. What is this called? Try drop card. Mouse overboard. All right, so this is all going to have to change. Let's see if I can just get this working. So instead of try quick move, what I'm going to do is if input device manager dot is controller active. This is redundant here, I think. If input device manager dot is controller active, we want to do begin drag. Am I setting the last clicked card? Clicking up. Where is this being set? Last clicked card. Is this never being set? Oh, last clicked card here. Clicking down equals mouse over card. Okay. Begin drag. Well, I could just do mouse over card. I guess it's fine. So begin drag here. Change card input state. Actually, I think what I probably want to do is just do this. Change card input state dot dragging. And then we're going to do get viewport dot set input as handled. And then return. So if our controller is active, when we release the A button, so clicking up, we're going to change it to the dragging state and mark that input as handled. Then we're going to go into the dragging state here. The last clicked card should be not null, and we should be able to drag the card, and we can begin the drag there. So let's see what happens. Welcome back, thank you. Why C# and not GDScript? More structure with C#, I'm just more productive with it. I think it's easier to create more complex games with it, but that's just like a personal preference, that's all. Oops. Okay, so I also need to change into the I need to change. So this is the crux of the problem. So I'm in the dragging state. You can see that I'm dragging this card now and I can drop it. So that works fine. It's just that my controller needs to go and do something completely different now. I really don't want to create like individual control nodes for each of these cells. So I almost need a way of like intercepting. I need a way of changing so that I can select boards. The other problem too is I need to be able to do like quick move. So ideally what I'd be able to do is I'd be able to grab a card with a controller and then use the bumper buttons to like go over to this board and like to this board to that board. But I need to be able to like select individual cells to drop it. And I don't want to use control nodes. I don't know what to do. C# is usually faster even with regards to GDScript, but even in this case, I'm not sure why. Well, there's like a little caveat there. C# is faster if you stay in the C# layer. So if you're doing stuff that doesn't interact with the Godot API, which means that it doesn't need to call through the C# bindings and go and hit the C++ API and then like marshal and unmarshal results, right? Then if you stay purely in the C# layer, then yeah, it's faster. But when you account for all of like what I just said of like interacting with the Godot API, where like you call a C# method that ultimately needs to call down to the C++ layer, it needs to transform all the data, marshal all the data into a form that C++ expects, then marshal it back to like a C# object. That whole operation basically negates any any performance benefits you get from using C#. So using C# is not just like a free performance hack, right? It's like you can use it in a certain way for like particularly heavy operations to be a lot faster. But if if the slow operation is fundamentally just interacting with the Godot API a bunch, it's like it's not going to make that much of a difference using C# versus GDScript. My controller's not working again. Gosh, why is this happening? I really don't know what to do about this, honestly. I don't even have any like good ideas. Like I think, so if I break down the problem, basically what needs to happen is like every single focusable element in the game needs to become unfocusable while I'm dragging. And then I need to switch into a mode where I'm like jumping between individual cells on a board rather than jumping between controls. So that's like an entirely different control scheme, actually. Let me look at the Godot input docs real quick. So I was thinking maybe, so these boards, these all have a control in here, this border panel here, which is not really a great thing to use, but if I could focus on this, so I was thinking make these focusable elements while dragging, and then override a GUI input in here to handle, you know, the directions being pressed on the controller to navigate the cells on the board. The problem with that, though, is that I don't think that's going to work because my focus management system uses input event, which happens before GUI event. So this input, or let's focus manager here, find best focus and direction. This one is being called ultimately from get a grab focus and direction, which is being called from this input here. And the reason that's doing that is because this happens, because this happens in input and I'm consuming the event, it blocks the default Godot focus changing code, I guess, from running. So I'm basically like, this is just clobbering the default Godot behavior, which is fine. That's what I want. But that makes it hard to do things like override the GUI input here specifically for Godot, or for dragging. I'm trying to think of like, what's a clever way I can do this? Maybe I should just use control nodes for all the tile cells. What would that look like? So if I do, I mean, it would look like this if I just do control. Like a grid container. And then set all these. And then turn this down. So I could have individual cells here like this. Is that the way to do it? I'm going to create so many control nodes though. I mean, this would be an easy way to do it. I create a grid container with a number of columns equal to the number of columns in the board. And then I just create a bunch of 18 size controls. Register all of those with my focus manager. But I really don't want to just create a bunch of nodes. Man, I don't know. I don't know. Hello, Jhar, welcome. So what I was thinking, at this point is probably personal preference, which is fair. Input management is tough. It took me forever to set up dual controls for mobile and PC. Yeah, it is tough. I just don't... This would work, I think, if I did something like this. I don't know if I really want to be creating... You know, that's 9 controls there. And this is just a 3x3 board. You know, I could be creating dozens of controls per board, and I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea. Man, I'm stumped. I don't really know what to do here. I thought the video froze. Hello, Wuius, welcome. Yeah, I just don't know what to do. Let me look at my focus manager. The other approach that I'm thinking of taking is I disable all of the focus stuff while I'm dragging. So just make this basically like all a no-op. And make sure like refocus doesn't get called and grab focus and direction and so on and so forth. Just disable all of that, and then I can write some like custom input handling code, maybe in like the card mouse events manager. You're perfectly still, yeah. Never give up. Never give up, never surrender. Galaxy Quest. Well, this is kind of a bummer. My controller isn't working again. The problem I'm having is like I see multiple paths forward for making this happen. So it's not that I don't have a solution I can do. It's the problem is like I don't want to do this in a way that's going to like massively spaghettify the code. Like this has to be very reliable, predictable, easy to understand. What am I going to do? what would it take if I wanted to disable all of the focus stuff? Okay, let's just try something really floppy to start, and then we'll just see how that pans out. So I do want to commit that one. So Focus Manager, let's just do something very, very basic. Public static bool, disable all focus. Private bool is all focus disabled. Update focus toggle listeners. I don't know why I made that bool. Disable all focus. Update focus listener. If we have a controller active and the filter passes, let's do if not is instance.is all focus disabled. So if this is true, we're just going to go ahead and disable that focus. Okay. And let's do public static void. Enable all focus. Instance.is all focus disabled equals false. Instance.update. Okay. Try grab focus. If instance.is all focus disabled, or refocus if no focus. I may need to do that one too. Oops, I don't need to do that. I can just do this. Now let's do this. Let's make this return a bool. It's going to be a little bit weird, but that's okay. Input device manager. So we're only going to handle the input if essentially the focus is disabled. Now maybe that's not a good way of doing that, but anyway, so let's go back to the card mouse events manager. When we change the input state to dragging, what I'm going to do is card input state dragging. We're going to begin drag. We're going to do focus manager dot disable all focus. And then when we end the drag, wherever that is, Okay, let's see what that does. So my thinking is basically we bypass all the focus code that I wrote while we're in the dragging state because it's a special state. And then I can write logic specifically designed for handling just the card drag and drop. So when we're in a dragging state, it's essentially just a whole unique state. It doesn't account for any other focusable elements on the screen. It's just now we're in an input mode where we're going to control like which cells are selected. So yeah, that seems to be working. So what happens is I grab, I can't select anything. I'm pressing, I'm doing stuff until I press A to drop it, which doesn't work because whatever. But if I end the drag here, oh, my controller stopped working. Is my controller really not working or is it a bug in my system? Yeah, because I can press A, so A kind of like does the drop operation. So anyway, nothing becomes focusable. So you can see the cursor has actually disappeared because there's nothing focusable. So the way that it works is like the cursor doesn't appear if there's just nothing to focus. But if I press A again, it goes back and focuses something. So this is the part where I need to create my own logic for like the dragging state. So, and it was very critical that at this point, here, I only set the input as handled if I'm in a state where this could actually be handled. So the reason I'm returning false if all focus is disabled is basically just to say, don't mark the input as handled, right? Because I want to be able to listen for these events somewhere further down the tree, probably in my card mouse events manager. And so yeah, it's just a matter of like figuring out, I'm probably, now that I'm thinking about it, I probably want to spin up a different class for this. This is already doing too much. So I'll probably create like just a different like board navigation class or something. So I go to my card mouse events manager, probably create like a board controller navigation component or something like that, where I can write all the input logic in there, emit signals from that the card mouse events manager can listen for to update the various state in here that needs to be updated. I think that's the way to do it. I think that's the way to do it. Maybe you can make it as some kind of resource class that has a separate what grid is focused as a var. The thing is, I don't need to know what grid is focused. What I'm essentially going to do, I think, is just flatten all of the cells of all the boards together. Just basically don't even treat it as if there's differences in the boards and just kind of like find the next valid cell in direction regardless of what board it is. The only thing that I need to know from the board is, well, maybe I do need to know which board is hovered over, but I also just need to know if the board is like a droppable target, right? Like I need to know that it's not possible to drop a card on that board. But I think this is the way to do it. If I'm not, I think this is the way to do it. So this could potentially be a little bit, yeah, I don't feel super confident about this, like this all focus disabled stuff, but it can be improved one step at a time, I suppose. I have one job on this lousy ship. It's stupid, but I'm going to do it. Yep. My mom loves that line. My mom loves that line. She says it any opportunity she has to say it. That is a fun movie, though. If anyone hasn't seen Galaxy Quest, definitely give it a watch. It's very, very, very funny, very clever, really enjoyable to watch. It's endlessly quotable. Definitely a good movie. All right, tell you what, I need to take another quick break. Sorry about that, but I'm going to try to implement as much of this component as I can for handling the board drag and drop. We'll see how far we can get. I don't know if I'm in love with this solution, but we're just going to move forward and get something working and see what happens. You know, I think there may be room for improvement, but I should watch it. I haven't seen it in a while. Yeah, it's a good one. All right, so I'll be right back in just 3 minutes and we'll continue on. Okay, I'm back. Let's see what we can do. So let's create a new class. Let's just create it in manager here. We'll call this controller drag and drop manager. We're going to make this namespace game.manager global class public partial class controller drag and drop manager extend node. Okay, there are a couple of things that I want to do in here. Let's just connect and enter tree. We want to do, let's do this, focus manager. Let's do signal public delegate void all focus disabled event handler public delegate void all focus enabled event handler. Okay, let's just do public static void connect to all focus enabled action instance dot connect to all focus enabled action. This is just for me to be able to connect to this stuff easily. Connect to all focus disabled. Okay. All right, so disable all focus instance emit signal all focus disabled instance dot emit signal all focus enabled. Okay, so in here we're going to do focus manager dot connect to all focus disabled. Okay. Set process input to false. Set process input. Oh wait, this needs to be false. This one needs to be true. Okay. Set process input false. So this is just making sure that I'm not going to inadvertently listen for any input when I shouldn't be. Okay. This dot get card. Actually, maybe I didn't really need to do this. I guess I didn't really need to do that, but that's all right. Whatever. Okay. So I think what I want to do in here is essentially so I need to know which board I'm hovered over, but I also need to know which cell I'm hovered over, but that needs to be initialized with the initial board and the initial cell of the item. Mouse over board. So I've got a mouse over board in here. Let me think about this. Mouse over cell. Where is this being done? This is happening in process. Okay, so that's going to be a problem. I'm going to do something a little bit weird here. I'm going to clean this up later, but we're just going to block the process method from processing if input device manager is controller active. We're just going to straight up ignore that. Now, maybe I'll clean that up later, but I basically don't want any of this logic to run if we're doing a controller drag and drop. My intention is to manage all that input in here and emit signals related to when the state is changing that the card mouse events manager can listen for. So the card mouse events manager is essentially going to update this mouse over board, the mouse over cell, basically those two things based on the logic that's happening in here. And then, so that way when I go to try drop card, or whatever it is, where is that? Try drop card at position, it already has the at board correct, and it also has the, it will also have the grid position correct. Now this drag data, get card top left global position, I don't even know. Whatever. There's going to be a lot of weird things to figure out here, because there's like card offsets based on like the center of mass and like all that stuff, but let's just get what we can working here. So on drag began, dragging card board owner and dragging card. So we're going to store, let's do something like a hovered board and private. Do I need the, we'll just store the card, I guess. Dragging card. Okay. So hovered board is equal to card mouse events manager dot dragging cardboard owner, and dragging card is equal to card mouse events manager dot dragging card. Okay, so we've got those. For the hovered cell, if hovered board is equal to null, we'll just return. We need to store the hovered cell here. So private vector to I hovered cell. So hovered cell is going to be equal to, do I have a way of getting the original position? I almost need access to this whole drag data thing, but I guess we'll just follow the pattern here. Public vector to I, dragging card original position is instance valid drag data card question mark drag data dot original board position. Otherwise we'll do null, I guess. Dragging card original position. Okay. So let's grab that. If hovered board equals null, I'm just going to do just this safety check. I don't think it's necessary, but it doesn't hurt. And then we'll do okay. Okay, hovered cell is equal to original board position dot value. All right. So then we're going to want a couple of signals. Public, signal, public delegate, void, hovered board changed, event handler. Now we're going to pass the board along. Signal, public delegate, void, hovered cell changed, event handler. So we're going to emit both of those signals here. So emit signal hovered board changed. We're just going to put the hovered board in there. Emit signal hovered cell changed, hovered cell. So we're just going to initialize the data on drag began to those things. Okay. So in the input here, var next direction is equal to vector2 i.0. If evt.isActionPressed, game constants.action UI left. I'm going to make this a little bit nicer. I wish Copilot worked right now because it would tell me left, right. And we can do private static read only actions to directions. Okay. Okay, so for each of our action direction and actions to directions, we're going to say if evt.isActionPressed action next direction is equal to direction, and then we can break out of the loop. If the next direction is equal to vector2.0, we'll just return out of that. Otherwise, we're going to do get viewport.set input is handled, so we don't handle it anywhere else. And there's a lawnmower going. The audacity of these people. How dare they mow their lawn in the springtime? Unreal, dude. Anyway, so if next direction is equal to vector2.0, we're not going to do anything. Otherwise, we're going to try to move. So I'm going to create another method in here, private void try move next cell, vector2i direction. Okay, so we're going to do try move next cell direction. Oh, this needs to be next direction. So the idea in here is basically try to move to the cell in this board. Otherwise, try to move to next best guess board. So I think the idea here is that I'm going to see if the cell I'm trying to move towards is even in the board to begin with. And if, oh, this next direction needs to be vector2i. If the cell that I'm trying to move towards does not exist on the board, then what I'm going to try to do is move to the board that is in the direction that that I pressed. You mentioned wanting to learn Rust with GDScript. Any chance you try doing that in your next project, or would you only try it with an unimportant test project? I would like to try Rust. I probably would just like toy around with it. I don't know if I would ever get to the point where I'd feel comfortable to make like a serious project with it. But yeah, Rust has intrigued me lately. Hello, Neozoid. Welcome, welcome. Lurking again. Drufus Games, welcome. I heard Rust, yeah. Rust looks pretty cool. I want to try it out. So getting this on, let's just get it to work within the board that we're trying. So try move next cell. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, first of all, let's just do a little bit of hovered board is not equal to, or if hoverboard is equal to null, we'll just return. Okay, so var next desired cell is equal to hovered cell plus direction. If not, hovered board dot board inventory component dot is cell valid. Next desired cell, we're just going to return out of that. Or if not, otherwise we're going to say hovered cell is equal to next desired cell. Emit signal hover cell changed hovered cell. Okay. This is obviously not going to be fully functional, but we can start to get an inkling of like how this is going to work. Just want to say thank you for your multiplayer course. Was exactly what I needed for my current project. Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. R. Baron. Glad you liked it. I'm still writing everything I do in assembly just to make things more difficult. Very nice. Very nice. Your teaching style plus architectural philosophy is the rare center of the Venn diagram. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad you find it useful and happy to help. Okay, add child node. We want to do a, what did I call it? Controller drag and drop manager. Okay, so now we need to grab that. So we've got the controller drag and drop manager. This apply displacement needs to happen. So what I probably want to do is I think there's a way to refactor this, because like I do want a lot of this functionality, like the apply displacement here. What I don't want is I just don't want to update this mouse over cell. So this mouse over cell and the mouse over board, that needs to be changed. Where is mouse over board equals new mouse over board? Yeah. So there's like two steps here, right? In the process method, there's a step for getting all the data based on the mouse's active position. But then there's a step for applying all the displacement based on those positions. So I think I want to break this up into two steps where if we have a mouse connected or if we're using the mouse input mode, this stuff needs to be updated. And if we're using the controller, we don't obviously want to update the mouse specific state, but we do want to still apply this. So let's do, we want to do control drag and drop manager connect to hovered board changed on controller hovered board changed. And then controller drag and drop manager dot connect to hovered cell changed on controller. Okay, we'll throw those down at the bottom. Oh, I just realized I'm not actually emitting anything useful. Oh no, I am. So we're gonna do mouse over board is equal to hovered board. mouse over cell is equal to hovered cell. Okay. So let's take a closer look at this. I might just do like a little private method, private void, update mouse drag state. So in here, what we'll do is we'll say if input device manager.isController active, we're just going to return out of here. Otherwise, I don't know what this is doing. Get card top left global position. Oh, this uses the get global mouse position. I'm going to need to modify that. So I can handle that. Let's just do one thing at a time here. Oh, new mouse overboard, restore initial state. Oh, shoot. I think I need like update mouse overboard. Let's just say new board. This is going to become, we're going to take this out, put this here. Okay. We'll bring this down here. Update mouse overboard, hovered board. Get rid of this. Board placement state, restore initial state. Mouse overboard equals new mouse overboard. If new mouse overboard is not equal to null, we create the new state and we change mouse over cell to null. I don't think that's necessary. Is it necessary? That mouse over cell setting to null may be a problem. Anyway. I think this will be fine. So the problem is I have to use a vector2i nullable here for mouse over cell. Do I need to do that? Wait a minute. Is that even necessary? Yeah. Maybe not. Update. So let's see, update mouse over cell. Is that right? Whatever, I'm not going to reverse that right now. Okay. Apply displacement, displacement player. So we do update mouse drag state. Sorry, I'm locked in. So basically just splitting those things out. This will apply all the displacement it needs to do if the cell is changed. I'm realizing now in my, well, I don't have any board swapping happening, so update mouse. I think what I could do is I'm just going to have to control the order by controlling the order of signal emissions here. Yeah, actually that's already correct. So this might not be a problem. I'll just leave that there. So update mouse drag state is going to update the mouse over board and the mouse over cell every frame, but only if the controller is not active. This is going to need to change here, but I don't think that's just a visual thing. I don't think that necessarily needs to change right now. All right, let's see what I broke. What I'm mostly interested in is that I haven't broke the normal like mouse drag and drop, and then we'll see if the controller works. Do you have a link summary somewhere of your VS Code setup with Godot? I was using it in the past, but I found it a little finicky. I do not. Sorry, I don't have anything like that. Okay, is this drag and drop still working? Displacement is still working correctly. Quick move still works. Okay, now onto the controller. Oh my gosh, is it working? So it's not following the controller, but I am moving around the grid and it's applying the displacement. So what happens if I try to place it? Does it work? I can't move it over for some reason. It's hard to see what's going on. So it looks like the placement is not working because I can't grab it here and then move it over by one and then place it. But the displacement is working. You can see that that's working there. So let's look at the try drop card at position and see why that might not be working. Get grid position from the global position. Drag data, get card top left global position. Okay, that's a little bit finicky. Okay, so that's why it's not working. So it looks like I do actually need to modify this. What do I need to do here? Hello, V. Hey guys, gals, and ghouls. What are we breaking? Trying to add controller drag and drop support to the game without breaking any of the existing drag and drop stuff. So in here, I almost need to pass in vector 2i forced hover cell, maybe? Is that right? Wait a minute. I think this whole formula needs to change. Apply snap offset. What is that even doing? I don't really know what I even need. So get card top left global position. Is that doing what I think it's doing? Get center of mass times constant tile size. I don't think this is working the way that I think it is. What? I need to actually look at this. I don't think that method is working like it says it is, which is what's confusing me. It's going to be really hard to add the controller offset to that. Also, I don't know what these errors are, but that's all right. So I'm going to add a tapeworm. I really have no idea how that's working. So it's getting the center of mass. Oh, right, because it's based on the cards and the global mouse position. So it's basically recentering the card around the mouse position such that the top left cell of the card is the cell that we're retrieving. So the way that the board system works is that the position, since the cards are all different shapes, the position of the card on the board is wherever its top left cell is. And for items like the infusion altar, the root cell is changed. Oh, it's not changed. Oh, no, not the infusion altar. Where is the other altar? Don't I have another one? Occult altar. Yeah, the root cell here is 1, 0. So if it doesn't have a top left cell, which it doesn't have here, then the root cell gets this root cell offset. So it's essentially basically getting whatever the cell of the mouse global position is, but then it's subtracting the drag offset. Right. So really, I think all that needs to change is I just need to get the center position. I just need to get the center position of the currently hovered cell from the controller. Let's change this to cell global center position override. Otherwise, we'll fall back to the get global mouse position. Okay. Oh, this file is a mess. Let me just do... let's just do get global position override for drag. Get global top left position override for drag. I don't know. If the controller is not active, if hovered, let's see, mouse overboard is equal to null, or mouse over cell is equal to null. return null. Return mouse overboard dot global position plus mouse over cell divided by 2. No, that's not right. This needs to be a float vector too, which is kind of annoying. This one I can just force this to null because I know that it doesn't need the controller stuff here. Well, I have no idea if that's going to work, but let's see. Can't wait to try it. Yeah, I think the controller support is going to be really nice when it's finished, but it's got to be finished, you know? Lion MTG, hello, welcome. Sorry for being locked in, everybody. That did not work at all. I wonder why that didn't work. These conditional breakpoints never work for some reason. But let's just give it a try, I suppose. What is going on here? Okay, I don't know what was going on there, but okay. $24 and $107. I honestly don't know. This is not even close to correct. It looks like it's roughly following the grid. It's just a very small, like, compressed form of the grid, right? Because I can move over twice. And I can move up. Let's see. I've got 7 cells here, so I should be able to move up 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so it's just the position is wrong. Did I do my math wrong? Oh, yeah, I did. I thought I had a... Do I not have a 2-vector 2 extension method? I thought I had an extension method for vectors. Oh, maybe not. Well, let's just see if that works. I just did my math wrong, classic. Controller is not working again. I wonder if that's a bug with my game or if it's like my controller's bugging out. It keeps saying Xbox controller disconnected from Steam. Maybe I should close Steam. Exit Steam. Now it's working. Interesting. So the drag and drop placement is still not working. Also, it's not quite correct. I guess I probably don't need this extra offset then. Oh, I also have a GD print that's just going wild in here. Let's get rid of that. Oh, you know what the problem is? Actually, I don't know what the problem is. USB device not recognized. I think this thing is bugging out. Oh, that's going to be really annoying. Why is this controller not working? What the heck? Do you see this? USB device not recognized. Oh, this is great. Maybe I should go get another controller. Okay, here we go. Nope, that's wrong too. So one problem is, so the reason why it's going off the screen there is because it's setting the mouse over cell to the top left cell. So I actually have, I can't really point to it, but where the bottom right corner of the Paladin is actually the cell that I have selected. That's not working either. Okay, so I think there's just a couple of issues here. That's not being moved correctly either. So like if I put a card here, it shouldn't be applying any displacement, but it is. Why is it doing that? Okay, so I've got a bunch of issues to fix here. I think it's getting there though. Like I think these are just, once these issues are addressed, it will be all right. I think the most important thing is like I've got the framework now that I can use to like do the drag and drop on the boards. That was like the last big thing, or that this is like the last big thing that I need to figure out for controller support. But then the rest of it is just like making sure that all the interactions in the game work as expected. So in other words, like after this major piece is done, the rest of the controller support work is just going to be making sure that the UX is good, like that things are being selected when they expect to be selected, that you know, things are auto-focused. That makes sense. It's just this last piece, this board drag and drop, needs to be fixed, and my controller's not working. So that's fun. But the thing that makes me a little bit nervous is like you know, anytime that I try to touch a system that is like a major system of the game, like the drag and drop, and I just try to extend it or augment it, like I get very nervous because like I could introduce bugs, you know, and I don't want to do that, obviously. But I think the mouse drag and drop still works. What happens if I enter, oh, my controller? Interesting. Anyway. Now the controller's working. Maybe there is a bug in my code. I should probably... Oh, and I can select my cards off the screen here. So yeah, I think what I'll need to do, going back to the context boundary, is I probably want to put a context boundary in this UI, but then dynamically enable and disable it, right? So when the inventory is closed, we disable the context boundary so that all of these things on the map can be focused, but nothing over in the inventory can be focused. And then when the inventory is open, there should be a context boundary here that prevents any input from going to the map, which is not actually possible right now because I actually disable the map input when the inventory is open. But anyway. And then I probably want to do things like remember the last selected map node, right? So if I'm on this map node and I open this up, go to my inventory and I close, it should probably refocus that map node. So like that's what I'm talking about, like little UX things like that. But I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think that like once I figure this out, the bulk of the controller support work will be done, and then it's just a matter of like polishing it and making sure it all feels and works as expected. The other major thing that I'm going to need to figure out is scrolling. So when you're on an item that has like a scroll bar, like what do you use to scroll it? Probably we'll just use like the right analog stick or something. Yeah, something like that. Oh, no, yeah. Just realized that today is longer than normal. Yeah, I really wanted to get that controller stuff done, but I am going to end the stream now. So I hope you guys all enjoyed watching me struggle through controller stuff, but if you just got here, I kind of went over... If you just got to the stream, I kind of went over how my input handling system works at the beginning with respect to controller support. So if you want to go back and rewatch the VOD, I kind of do a little mini deep dive into that. But anyway,
You can wishlist Alchemy Mortis on Steam. I'd appreciate it if you would do that. That's linked below. You can also join the Patreon. The playtest is live right now. The Alchemy Mortis playtest is live right now for Patreon members. So if you go to Patreon and subscribe, you will get access to the playtest right now. The public playtest will be coming in the very near future, in less than a week. So you can wait for that. You don't have to pay to get access to that. Everyone will be able to try the public playtest if you so desire. But thank you all for your support. I just got here. Thank you all for your support. I appreciate it. And join the Discord. And yeah, I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye-bye for now.